Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Greenbelt Foundation's World Soil Day webinar, Building Healthy Soils in Ontario. My name is Charlene Williams, and I am the Program Manager for Environmental Stewardship at the Weston Family Foundation. It's my pleasure to be your host for today's event, and I'm so pleased to see so many of you joining us here to learn about the needs, interests, and opportunities affecting soil in Ontario. At the Weston Family Foundation, we work to improve, restore, and protect biodiversity of Canada's landscapes through funding programs that enable land managers such as yourselves to access the information, tools, and resources you need to be good stewards of the land. We are incredibly proud to be supporting a wide range of soil health projects taking place across the country as part of our soil health initiative, and are especially pleased to be partnering with the Greenbelt Foundation here in Ontario on a multi-year program that works directly with farmers to measure soil health and provide decision-making tools that enable the adoption of beneficial management practices. Together, this work, combined with that of our other program teams, is helping to build the evidence base and momentum needed to improve and sustain soil health here in Canada. We're all here today because it's World Soil Day, a day dedicated to understanding and celebrating the essential role that soils play in our lives. Today serves as an important reminder that soil is truly at the heart of the food production, local ecosystems, and environmental resilience we all rely and depend upon every day. As many of you will know, this year's theme is Healthy Soils for Healthy Cities, an important concept that could not be more relevant to the Greenbelt Foundation's work. As you know, Ontario's Greenbelt is home to over 4,000 farms that are directly connected to some of the country's largest urban markets. Its healthy soils grow the food that feeds our cities and support a wide range of jobs that sustain the people and communities living throughout the region. These soils also provide essential ecosystem services ranging from flood mitigation and water filtration to cooling urban areas and supporting biodiversity, all of which help to build healthier, more resilient communities here in Ontario. Today's session is all about sharing knowledge, celebrating progress, and building momentum toward healthier soils. To do that, we've brought together researchers, farmers, and soil experts who are deeply involved in understanding and improving soil health in the region. We'll begin today's webinar with the presentation from Ryan Carlo, Program Lead at the Greenbelt Foundation, who'll provide a bit of an overview of the Foundation Soil Health Program, introduce what soil health assessment is, and talk a little bit about why we test soils on farm. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Jenny Bauer, research soil scientist at the Soil Health Institute, who'll guide us through the recent soil health results from across the Greater Golden Horseshoe. After that, we'll move into a panel discussion where we'll be exploring some of the most common questions we hear from producers, such as which BMPs have the greatest impact, how to measure soil health progress over time, and how to adapt when things don't quite go to plan. Finally, I'll wrap up the session with information on how to access CEU and KSE credits. Without further ado, I'll hand things over to Ryan to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlene. Really appreciate the introduction. And thanks everyone again for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you about the Greenbelt and the Greenbelt Foundation's soil health program that we call Healthy Soils for Sustainable Farms. The Greenbelt is over 2 million acres of protected land, which along with the Greenbelt Plan, established in 2005, to address the unique needs of the Greater Golden Horseshoe region and the Greenbelt geography. Agriculture is the predominant land use within the Greenbelt, accounting for over 750,000 acres, which is nearly 40% of the Greenbelt's total land area. It contains two specialty crop regions, the Holland Marsh and the Niagara tender fruit and grape area. The Greenbelt is home to over 4,000 farms, accounting for 9% of the total farms in Ontario. But Greenbelt farmers punch well above their weight. With only 6% of Ontario's farmland, the Greenbelt accounts for more than 53% of our fruit acres, 11% of our vegetable acres, and 46% of our nursery acres. Ontario's Greenbelt has been successful at protecting farmland. Since 2005, prime agricultural land conversion within the Greenbelt has averaged around 2 hectares per year, compared to over 900 hectares across the rest of the province. Greenbelt farms have slightly higher revenues per farm than the rest of Ontario, with about 60% higher revenues per acre. In 2020, the Greenbelt's agri-food sector generated $4.1 billion in GDP and close to 59,000 jobs. Greenbelt soils are critical to our natural systems and the economy, but we need to build resilience in the face of challenges that are unique to farmers in near urban landscapes. So that's where our new soil health program comes in. This is a 4-year pilot program to bring soil health assessment and BMP education to farmers in the Golden Horseshoe region. It's a partnership with the Soil Health Institute, and we have an advisory committee and subcommittees made up of Ontario agricultural organizations, many of whom are in the room today, including partners at the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness, as well as the University of Guelph. The goal of the program is to measure an increase in the implementation of BMPs on the landscape by using soil health assessments to show farmers what's possible for their soils. I'm now going to pass it to Dr. Jenny Bauer from the Soil Health Institute to present more on our project, the soil health indicators that we measured in our program.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and happy World Soil Day, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today, so thanks for including me. I want to start with actually our conclusions from this study, and then I'll explain more about how we arrived here. So we found through our research in the greater Golden Horseshoe that soil health indicators and soil health in general improved from beneficial management practices. In particular, reducing disturbance and increasing living roots improved our soil health indicators. Manure also improved 2 of our soil health indicators. But critically, the highest soil health was observed on fields that employed multiple or stacked BMPs. So using different practices in combination definitely works. All right, to zoom out a little, at the Soil Health Institute, when we work with growers in measuring soil health, we typically hear 2 questions. 1, is my soil healthy? And then 2, compared to what? And for this, I always like to start with a human health metaphor because it's a little easier to relate. So one analogy would be human heart rate. We know that this is influenced by lifestyle, by things like exercise, but it's also how healthy your heart rate can get also depends on your age and characteristics like gender. And so, you can't control your age, and that is going to ultimately influence how healthy that heart rate can get. Well, soil is pretty similar, and there's a wide diversity of soil types out there. I had to put up some of my favorite soil watercolors as my Zoom background today, so maybe you can ooh and ah over those. Those are from Europe, unfortunately, but we have amazing soil diversity in Canada and Ontario as well. So just like humans, inherent soil properties like soil depth and texture and drainage influence how healthy a soil can get. We also know that management is hugely influential on soil health. And so that's going to be like that lifestyle of the soil. In the image shown here, we've got 2 different managements after a recent rain, but the soil employing BMPs on the left has allowed the water to really enter that soil and is storing that water for later, whereas it's just ponding up and running away in the soil on the right. I started to touch on this, but soil serves a multitude of functions on the farm. And so some of these functions include cycling nutrients, allowing water to enter, storing that water, draining water, resisting pests and pathogens, helping plants grow under stress, supporting plants, livestock, and soil fauna, and resisting erosion. So the goal of a soil health test is really to measure and ultimately to improve these soil functions. That brings me to the goal of our soil health benchmarking project. Our goal was to benchmark 1.8 million acres of grains and oil seeds. And note that this doesn't just include the Greenbelt area. So to do this, we grouped soil by inherent soil properties like particle size and drainage, because we know these are really influential on soil health. And then we also grouped soil by management. We collected a detailed 5-year management history. In the image on the right, you can see the map of this region in Ontario and the results of our stratification. So we selected soils that were well drained and intermediately drained from a range of particle size classes, from clay to fine loamy and coarse loamy. We did leave out, though, for example, the Oak Ridges moraine and areas that are not in high use for farming grains and oil seeds. We sampled 285 soils in 2023 and 2024. And this map now shows the areas with the highest sample density. So basically a heat map of where we had the most samples. We sampled from Hamilton up into Durham and York, and we measured a range of soil health indicators comprising the Soil Health Assessment and Plan, or SHAP indicators developed by OMAFA, as well as indicators recommended by the Soil Health Institute. Now, I mentioned that there's a lot of soil diversity. Oh, can you go back one? Thank you. And on the soil texture triangle, this can be shown but in the spread across all of these texture categories. So there, you can thank the glacier for this. It really deposited a range of textures. But what I'm proud of is that we were able to benchmark soil health across this diversity in surface soil textures. Once we analyzed the data, we presented it as soil health reports to our participating farmers. This represented a comprehensive report for each field site. It included an explanation of the program and the soil health indicators. You can go to the Greenbelt website to see an example soil health report. And it also provided detailed results and soil-specific comparisons to give producers an idea of how healthy their soil is and how healthy it could become. It also involved an evaluation of soil health and representation of the field management. Okay, so now I want to give an overview of the soil health indicators we measured and to provide some background to our results. And this could also help, if you're thinking about measuring soil health on your farm or interested in learning more about soil health assessment, this will be a good overview. I want to start with soil organic carbon, which is really an important one. And I put it as interchangeable with organic matter here because really you can think of organic carbon as just a more accurate way of measuring organic matter in the lab. So organic carbon measures the carbon in organic matter, and organic matter measures all of the material associated with living and dead organisms in the soil. So higher organic carbon improves soil structure, microbial activity, plant available nutrients, and available water. And just as an example of this, I want to lead you to the graph on the right. This shows the available water holding capacity as a function of clay, which is on the horizontal axis. And it's actually highly influenced by organic carbon. And so organic carbon is one of these keys to managing water in your soil. For example, and if you can click forward, if we have a 13% clay content soil, we only have 1% organic carbon, pretty low. If we're able to actually improve that organic carbon, we can go from around 17% available water holding capacity to 20% available water holding capacity. And that might seem like a small change, but when you think about the capacity of soil to absorb water during a storm event, that could be critical for infiltrating that water and then also hanging it onto it for plants if there's a dry spell afterwards. The next indicator I want to talk about is related. So permanganate oxidizable carbon is a fraction of carbon, and there's been some scientific debate about what that fraction means, but ultimately it could potentially be a measure of early change in carbon. And so sometimes it can take a while for organic carbon to give a signal of change after implementing management practices, but permanganate oxidizable carbon could show that a little bit earlier. Organic carbon stocks are another useful soil health indicator. These represent the total amount of carbon stored in the soil down to 30 centimeters, although you can calculate it at different depths depending on your sampling. This incorporates soil density and can be used for carbon accounting, whereas soil organic carbon only represents concentration. This accounts for that bulk density as well. And a change in organic carbon stocks gives the same benefits as soil organic carbon roughly, but may pick up on changes that are happening deeper. Another carbon indicator we measured was respiration or potentially mineralizable carbon. You can think of this as basically how the soil life, how much carbon the soil life is exhaling as it respires. So it's a measure of microbial activity, and higher respiration improves nutrient cycling and can also indicate greater residue decomposition. So this is huge if you're trying to prepare a good seed bed. Often corn residue can be really difficult to break down. So higher respiration might indicate that you're able to get through that residue more efficiently with higher microbial activity. And then this might be my favorite indicator. So next to last, aggregate stability. This represents a measure of soil structure and resistance to disturbance, but it actually is involved in a multitude of soil processes. So not only does it improve soil structure and resistance to disturbance, but when you think about the complexity of the food web contained within soil, there's everything from, very small bacteria to large earthworms and even molds. Those all need different sizes of pores to live and grow as their habitat. They also rely on food sources that have different pore size requirements. So a complex, stable soil structure is really necessary for a living food web in the soil. It also provides aeration, so allows oxygen to enter, which is important for plant growth. It allows water to infiltrate and also is useful for storing water. All right, and finally, we measured potentially mineralizable nitrogen. So this is an excellent way to measure plant available nitrogen, which improves nutrient cycling and again represents that ammonium and nitrate that plant nitrogen-loving plants like corn rely on. So having higher potentially mineralizable nitrogen is really important for thinking about how some of those cash crops are able to access nutrients that are processed by microbes. Within our study, we sampled 3 different managements. One we categorized as baseline or traditional, and this represented corn and soybean rotations with spring cultivation and vertical disking in spring and or fall. As a comparison, we also sampled fields with soil health practices. These involved corn, soybean, winter wheat rotations, often including a cover crop after winter wheat. And all of these fields used no-till or reduced tillage or rotational tillage. And similar numbers of farms applied manure in the baseline and soil health groups. So the first two groups provide a measure of comparing progress, but the third group we measured, the reference sites, these help us understand the maximum capacity or potential for soil health in a given soil. And these included grazed pastures, hay fields, orchards, fence rows, anything with undisturbed perennials that was really maxing out those soil health principles. And our approach in setting up this study was really designed to be a space for time sampling effort. This differed a little bit from how you might think about traditional fertility sampling, where you might be wanting to capture a high density of sampling in order to understand nutrient dynamics and make fertilizer recommendations. Within our study, we focused on a single representative location in each field. Our goal was sampling a lot of fields, so 285 sites total. And what this allows us to do is this space for time sampling design really allows us to look at the compare management effects after controlling for soil type or looking at similar soils in different managements, rather than having to wait decades and sampling a single field every 5 years to pick up change. And so it's a way of using the difference in spatial distance as a way to approximate temporal change. Okay, now we'll get into the data, and I don't want to overwhelm you here, but basically, to sum up, we found significant differences in many of our indicators, but all of our indicators showed increases in soil health when BMPs were implemented. So in the table on the right, I've chosen 3 of the most responsive soil health indicators, which are soil organic carbon, aggregate stability, and respiration. And all 3 increased from BMPs. Aggregate stability and respiration had significant increases of 15% and 31%. The increases were even, but there's more room to grow. So the potential increase in soil health jumps when we consider how much soil health could be improved within those references. However, obviously those references are in different systems, so that's probably not the type of soil health we could expect for row crop systems. And in the plot on the left, I'm showing an example of what those soil health differences look like. So this is aggregate stability according to clay content. And this just represents how we account for soil differences within our study. So we've got a wide range of clay contents, and we're able to actually model that relationship with clay so that when we compare soil health to baseline or reference to baseline, we're picking up on some of that soil variation. On top of that, you might be wondering why aggregate stability seems to decrease with higher clay, since we know that clay binds soil particles together. That's really just because of the way we measure aggregate stability. So clay particles are smaller and they tend to disperse more, which is the way this measurement is conducted. All right, next we looked at which specific BMPs influence different indicators. And this was a really cool part of the analysis because we found that, as we might expect when looking at different practices, different indicators were actually responding to different practices. So, of course, organic amendments add a lot of organic matter to the soil. It's not surprising that manure was the top practice influencing soil organic carbon. But interestingly, aggregate stability responded to both reduced tillage as well as increased living roots, like adding winter wheat and cover crops into the rotation. Finally, respiration responded to both winter wheat and manure. So you can think of that as really those practices kind of feeding the microbiome with that increased rhizosphere and food from the manure. And as an example of this, in the plot on the right, I'm showing aggregate stability. Now, instead of using a categorical representation of management, looking at how aggregate stability changes from increased tillage intensity. So with 0 representing no soil disturbance and 30 representing maximum soil disturbance, you can see that after accounting for soil differences, there's a change in around 0.12 in aggregate stability, or 1.5 in aggregate stability here. But on top of that, winter wheat and cover crops add to that aggregate stability when they're included in the rotation. So I think this really demonstrates the power of stacking BMPs. So to sum up, we found that soil health indicators responded to beneficial management practices that Ontario farmers are using. We found that, in particular, reducing soil disturbance and increasing living roots improved aggregate stability and respiration. Manure improved organic carbon and respiration. And then the highest soil health was observed on those fields with multiple BMPs. Feel free to reach out personally with questions, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jenny. Really appreciate that. I'm excited to continue our presentation talking about our brand new regional report. So this is highlighting the progress in our program to date. This report is a first of its kind in Ontario report about soil health. It's focused on our target region, the Greater Golden Horseshoe, provides a summary of our program work, results, and proof of best practices. This report bridges the gap between research and practice and highlights how farmers in this critical region are already taking measurable steps to improve their soil health. The regional report is available on the resource table outside, and for those online, there'll be a link in the chat as well. So to highlight some of the results in the regional report, we selected 3 key indicators that producers would be the most interested in seeing the results for. The first being soil organic carbon. We presented the average results for the 3 management systems and 2 common soil types in the region. The results show that field sites implementing soil health practices like reduced tillage and cover cropping had higher organic carbon values than those farms using more typical management practices. Additionally, long-term undisturbed reference sites had much higher values as expected. We also showed that fields that are on the clay loam soil type differed in results than those on the sandy loam soil type, highlighting the importance of comparing like soils together like we've done in our work. Results for respiration and aggregate stability showed similar trends. Farmers can now compare their results from their own soil health test they conduct to these results if they're a cash crop farmer in the Greater Golden Horseshoe to see how they stack up to these averages across the region. Another result presented in the report was a demonstration on some of the field management practices that have impacts on the soil health indicators. These bars show the percentage of actual fields in our study that met an example goal, some proportion of the reference value for a specific indicator. In the first case, how many of the fields were able to get 3/4 as good as the reference in terms of aggregate stability. We see that 39% of fields who till annually met this goal, 45% of those who rotationally tilled met this goal, but nearly 80% of those sites that were fully no-till were able to meet this goal. So the larger the reduction in tillage, the higher the aggregate stability score. It was a similar case for cover crops. Cover crops are important for the soil microbiome and can be tied with soil respiration values. 34% of sites using no cover crops reached 50% of the average respiration score, but 54% of sites using at least one cover crop in their rotation reached that goal. So some of the report takeaways are that fields that use a suite of BMPs have higher soil health indicator values across all metrics compared to fields that don't. The greatest increase in soil health value is seen in aggregate stability, potentially mineralizable nitrogen, and respiration. Data on reference sites can help farmers set their own goals. And the more consistently that you implement a best management practice, the greater the likelihood of improving soil health overall. So our program is also taking steps to turn these reports into action on the ground. In addition to providing soil health program participants with a soil health test, our program is providing in-person visits with a certified crop advisor to walk through the report and some of the recommendations. In these meetings, we're able to discuss soil health goals, challenges, and opportunities on the farm with the producers in our program. We can help connect producers to resources and programs that can help them with practice implementation and provide opportunities to learn through social media campaigns, reports like the new one we just launched, and in-person events. And this project, I'd just like to thank some of our funders and partners. This project is funded and supported in part by the Weston Family Foundation Soil Health Initiative and the governments of Canada and Ontario under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, a 5-year federal, provincial, territorial initiative. Thank you to these funders for their support and all of our project partners, many of who are in the room today. Thank you for your support, and I'll pass it back to Charlene so we can start our panel.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Julie, for those excellent presentations. I'd like to thank you both for your presentations, as well as for setting the stage for the rest of our conversation today. We're going to move to our panel discussion now, where we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from farmers and soil health experts who are working to implement these concepts every single day. Joining us today are Gordon Alblas, a third-generation dairy and cash crop farmer from Hamilton, Ontario, Dr. Jenny Bauer, research soil scientist at the Soil Health Institute, Ryan Carlo, the program lead for the Greenbelt Foundation, and Jake Monroe, soil management specialist for field crops with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. Our panel are going to be talking through some of the most common questions raised by producers during soil health assessments and when adopting beneficial management practices. They'll be sharing practical insights, lessons learned from the field, and resources to help support soil health improvements on your farm. I can imagine we're all really looking forward to listening and learning from what our panelists have to share. So let's get started. My first question relates to the process of putting soil health principle into practice. And so, Gord, maybe I'll come to you first. I'm wondering if you can speak to what you see as being some of the most low-cost, simple, or least disruptive changes farmers can make to start to move their soil health in the right direction.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I would say one of the easiest things to do is incorporate a cover crop wherever possible. It has been talked about a lot here today, and for me, that was probably the biggest aha moment was after a couple of years of doing some cover cropping, which, to be fair, came as a challenge set by a neighbor to keep your field green all year round. And the outcome was something that had to be seen to be believed. We used to have I say used to, because we used to have a fairly heavy clay soil. And anybody who in this room who used to plow knows that two-wheel drive tractors, the front end gets a little light, and you pick up the front of the tractor. Now, in that same spot, as we stood in the field one day, I was looking at this soil, thought, this is a lot different than it used to be. It changed the structure of the soil. And literally, it was only a cereal rye put out there as a cover crop to start with. So a simple way is getting a cover crop out there. It can be cereal rye. It can even be planted at Christmas time and it will still grow. Maybe not this year, but most years.
It's a great answer. Jake, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts you'd like to add for practitioners looking to make a start at building their soil health.
Yeah, so Gordon took my first answer, but that's great. And Gordon and I, I've been on Gordon's farm many times, and he's been very innovative in his use of cover crops and reducing his tillage over the last number of years. And I guess I'd say to enable a number of different practices, I'd say an easy, low cost in the sense of, it's a proven practice in Ontario. We've got a tremendous amount of experience with including winter wheat in rotation. That enables you to get a much fuller cover crop into rotation. And for those who aren't fortunate to have manure like Gord does, it's going to open up opportunities for maybe manure from a neighbor or an organic amendment. And there are more and more of those options. So that's I'd say that's fairly easy way to start is open up that opportunity.
Thanks very much. Ryan, I'll direct this next question to you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about best management practices, maybe highlighting specific practices that are known to more consistently improve soil health.
Yeah, thanks very much. With our work, we've really seen that tillage has a really large impact on our soil health indicators. The more tillage that you do, the lower the indicator scores tend to be. So any practice that you can do on an individual farm to reduce tillage is really beneficial to overall soil health. It can be as simple as limiting the depth or the speed of the tillage tool that you're doing, moving towards a rotational tillage system, strip till, or to fully no-till. All of those will have a large payoff. It also can allow you to incorporate other BMPs like cover crops that can do some of the tillage for you. So you can park your equipment and let some cover crops with some large roots take care of some of those uses that normally tillage would have taken. So again, really important to reduce tillage overall to increase soil health across all of our indicators.
Thank you. Jake, I'm going to come back to you. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to how farmers can think about maintaining soil health progress in years when things like weather or pests or market conditions don't really go to plan.
Yeah, so maintaining progress, I think, yeah, thank you.
Hold on.
Yeah. So I think, this year would be a great example of that. It's like, higher prices for inputs, lower crop prices relative to what they've been. And then for parts of our province, really, drought stress. So I think, maintaining progress or momentum in terms of soil health practices, I think a big part of that, and it's a bit of a shout out to the Ontario Soil Network, which Gordon's a part of, and other groups like OSCIA is having a network of growers and those to lean on when things maybe are tougher just across the board, but may, sometimes with some of these practices, cover cropping, for example, we can see sometimes some negative interactions there, or some learnings, in dry weather, sometimes if it's too wet. And so having that network to learn from and move forward with is great. Just, quick, I think it's maybe a very basic answer, but, crop insurance, really fortunate in Ontario to have, to be able to enroll in crop insurance and have that peace of mind, I think is also, a very helpful thing.
Gord, I'll direct this next question to you. I'm wondering if you could speak to how you decide when to stick with a practice versus when to pivot and try something else.
So recently I heard something that I want to share everybody here is people often like to talk about a normal year, but normal is just a dryer setting on your dryer. So there is no such thing as a normal year. Every year has a different stressor. So diversity would be probably one of them. If you are putting a cover crop after winter wheat, I highly suggest putting different types of plant families out there, some that can handle hot, some that can handle cold, some that can handle drought, excess of moisture, and have a plan to deal with that cover crop as needed at the end. Most of the time, winter can take care of most cover crops. But that'll enable something to grow. If it's a year that is too dry and hot, if you just put oats after winter wheat, for instance, it won't grow. You'll have a cover crop intentions. You have the cost out there, the cost of planting, and you have nothing left. So that's one instance. In the springtime, for the brave souls who will plant green, I will be one of those. If it's really dry, it's important to terminate that cover crop ahead of time. But if it's really wet, it's a tool that can enable you to plant sooner because it helps wick that, respire that moisture out of that soil profile and gives you a root mass to drive on. So that's as the weather shifts, you have to make that that change at that time. You can't sit here in December and say next year I'm going to spray off or terminate my cover crop on May 15th. Well, May 15th might be a problem next spring because if it was too wet, if you terminated that cover crop, it very often turns into gumbo if it gets wet from then on. So.
Jake, I'm wondering if you have anything you'd like to add about that idea of, when do we stick with something and when do we pivot and try something new?
Yeah, I sure do. And so my experience is, obviously not as a farmer myself, but working with many farmers and kind of pushing them through on-farm trials to, Gordon mentioned planting green or other practices that would maybe be considered a little bit riskier, trying to accelerate soil health improvement in a shorter amount of time by maximizing biomass or using other innovative practices. And I guess my observations from working with, in large part, really innovative, progressive growers is kind of being open to changing direction. I see like an openness to, yes, you've got a certain idea that you start out with, but going to meetings, speaking with others, and being very willing to kind of change your tack on it, adjust your approach, and being honest with yourself when evidence to the contrary comes up. And that's why I love check strips. Like I said, nothing like an on-farm trial. Single check strip, great, but multiple check strips and replications can really quite quickly give you a clear answer on whether help you be honest with yourself, whether you're headed in the right direction or not. So that's, I guess, a strong piece of advice for growers out there.
Thanks very much, Jake. Jenny, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to why those stacked best management practices tend to have greater impact than single practices alone. And yeah, if you can share a little bit about what combinations work best for this region.
Great question. And I should say I'm currently speaking from North Carolina, and I'm not a farmer. So, I'll have to route some of the wisdom Gord's way. But just looking at the data, I think an aha moment for me was that, coming from a geology and pedology research background, I was like, okay, don't disturb the soil. If we can go to no-till, that seems, really important. But it took kind of understanding that the role of living roots to kind of advance my understanding. Even if you have minimized disturbance in that soil, if you don't have an active rhizosphere, then you're not really able to build that really good soil structure in kind of a smaller amount of time. And so it's really kind of a kickstart to excellent aggregate stability and soil structure. So I think that's a good example of stacking practices that your no-till soil health is going to be higher if you add a cover crop. I think another one is that maybe you're working on your microbiome by using cover crops, but feeding the microbiome with some organic inputs really is able to cultivate more microbial activity, greater respiration, and help decompose some of the biomass that may have accumulated from last year's crops or cover crops.
Thanks, Jenny. We've spoken a lot about best practices for building soil health, but I'm wondering maybe, Jake, if you can speak to some of the signs of increased soil health. So how do we know if it's working?
Yeah, so aside from soil health testing, which is great, we've seen an awesome overview of the work Greenbelt's done and what we've learned through that. But in terms of kind of simple visuals, I think of especially kind of fall time of year, a nice visual for growers is to look at, especially after soybean harvest, look for residue bunched up all together, earthworm middens that represents deep burrowing earthworms that rely on an undisturbed surface, so and a food source. So that's where no-till in combination with cover crops, which has been mentioned, that's where we can really build those populations. They do a lot of heavy lifting for us in terms of recycling residue and recycling nutrients. We saw the visual of those side-by-side fields after a heavy rain. That's a really clear one, and the growers I work with, that's one of the most important signs that their soil health is heading in the right direction, is they can handle heavy rain. So not only retaining topsoil, not losing it to erosion, but in a year like we have this year, we want to hang on to every millimeter we can get to carry that forward for the crop. So yeah, those would be two thoughts on pretty simple visuals.
If I can jump in here, just to reiterate that this year, a local grower and I have noticed that in the drought that we dealt with here, our soil health seems to have carried the crop through this year with some very surprising yield results, especially on the neighbor's sandier, gravelier soil. We're having a chat on the way in here this morning about just how much that has held it through this year. And that's the only thing we really can attribute it to is a focus on that soil health. And we heard earlier today 50 bushels on corn for the corn with the cover crops included. And I would say I could see some of that on my own farm.
Thank you both so much. I've got one more question, which I'll direct to all of our panelists, maybe starting with Gord and then Jenny, and then we'll go to Ryan, and then we'll go to Jake. But I'm wondering if each of you can share the one tool or resource that you wish more farmers knew about when planning their soil health improvements. So Gord, let's come to you first.
I might cheat and say two right here. The first one is one that we don't think of too often, and that would be to have a baseline soil test to start with. But something that is a soil health test. We're talking about this here today, but it's not as if I decided today I wanted to start in the spring with something. I want to grab a sample in the spring. I don't even know what lab I would send it to at this point. I would get something that I could base my soil health on to go forward with. The other one real quickly is a resource, and I had the benefit of having neighbors, but find farmers willing to share. I know in Ontario here we have the Soil Network, a fantastic organization with many farmers who are willing to mentor, and having that guide to phone up when your planter's not working through the cover crop that you decided to leave is very helpful.
Jenny, I'll come to you next.
You caught on me?
Yes.
Great, because Gord took both of mine, but no, I got more. I'll say a sharpshooter can be really useful for just kind of, looking at that soil structure, kind of get dirty, see what's going on, and track it over time. I'll also put in a plug for the Soil Health Institute's Slakes app. It's a way of, that was actually one of the indicators we were showing results from today, but you can use it on a smartphone and do it, in the back of your pickup truck or at a kitchen table with minimal supplies. So I'll throw a link to that in the chat. It's called Slakes.
Thanks, Jenny. Jake, let's come over to you.
Sure. So I've got to give a shout out to my OMAFA colleague, Kevin McCaig, who's developed a really nice tool that's on ag maps. It's buried in there a little bit. So you gotta go look and or find Kevin's information that he's got online for it. But the water erosion potential mapping tool, it gives you an idea of where the greatest erosion risk is within your field in a spatially explicit way. So it gives you a 2D map of where that's happening, and then you can target some of your BMPs, whether that's reduced tillage, no-till, or cover cropping to some of the areas that might need it most, or work with your conservation authority or other resources. So that's a good tool for growers to check out.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Ryan, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on tools or resources that people should know about.
Yeah, I think especially when farmers are first looking at adopting some new practices, it can be really daunting. So I think farmers should not feel bad about taking advantage of some of the programs that are available from Ontario Agricultural Partners like OSCIA or their local conservation authorities to help get some funding to start implementing some practices just to get started. It is a big investment to get going, so reach out. There are definitely resources available for you to take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you all so much for your thoughtful and insightful answers. As we come to the end of today's webinar, I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for such an engaging and thoughtful discussion. I also want to extend a big thank you to our presenters for sharing their insights, and of course to each and every one of you for joining us today to learn more about soil health and the adoption of BMPs in the region.